Hello everyone, welcome to this workshop on Hackintoshing from the Tech Club of VIT Vellore. Today we are going to be talking about what is a Hackintosh, how you can build your own Hackintosh, and it'll be a hands-on workshop. So I'm going to build a Hackintosh right now and show it to you guys how it's done and the different ways in which it can be done. And we will entertain questions at the end if we have enough time. So let's start right away. So the agenda for today is I will be telling you what is a Hackintosh and why you should build a Hackintosh instead of going out there and buying a Mac, and the legal implications of Hackintosh and the deployment methods that are there in the general community right now, and the future of Hackintoshing, as Mac is very notorious for changing its operating systems in a couple of years, just like they've done this year, coming up with not just OS X but OS 11 with the release of macOS Big Sur. And that is, in fact, what we are going to be building today, the latest and greatest operating system on Mac. So let's start with what is a Hackintosh, right? So a Hackintosh is basically a computer, a normal general computer, as we like to call it, a PC that is running the Mac OS, which is provided by Apple. Now, I've put together a kind of decent definition of what is a Hackintosh. It is basically any computer that is running Mac OS on a non-Apple hardware. Now, this is a very generalized definition because if you recall about 2 years back, Apple phased out its older iMacs and MacBooks. They lost support for the macOS Catalina. Now, Apple likes to do this for various reasons. They either don't have the time and resources to keep supporting their old Macs, or they just want you to buy a new Mac. So they phase out older Macs. So if you are running a newer, non-supported version of macOS on an old Apple hardware, it is still a Hackintosh. According to the end user's license agreement, of course, the Apple's macOS should only be running on Apple hardware. So if you're running it on anything but non-Apple hardware, then it is a Hackintosh. Now, it requires the tweaking of these components. I will be going over these in detail. Now, to run a Mac OS, what you essentially need is to mimic your computer to look just like a Apple computer. To do that, you would have to either tweak the macOS itself to either get the installer running on your computer or to get the drivers injected directly into macOS. So you might have to tweak the macOS itself. Or the most important aspect of a Hackintosh, as we like to call it, the bootloader. You might have to tweak the bootloader, and it sounds all fancy and too technical, but trust me, when we get into it, you'll get a good hang of it if you're uh, a general computer tech savvy person. Now, you might have to tweak your BIOS because you ultimately have to mimic your computer to look like a Mac. So you will have to mimic your BIOS to look like a Mac as well. Now, BIOSes have different options. Some are compared to the others more advanced. Some have more options. Some have few options. Now, if your BIOS it doesn't have the enough options to mimic it like a Mac, you don't have to worry because we have the ACPI tables, that is the DSDT patches, the SSDT patches. We'll go over these in detail. These sound very technical and difficult to do, but these are quite easy, and people are there to support you on forums, and just a Google search would also help. Now, at the end, the hardware, you might have to change your hardware altogether because there are some specific hardwares that are not supported by macOS and just cannot be supported by macOS because of the limitations. Now, examples of these are like Ryzen laptops. Ryzen laptops are just not, it's not possible to run Hackintosh on a Ryzen laptop right now. Also, the newer NVIDIA graphic cards, which are the 16 series, the 20 series, those are just not. It's just not possible to run Hackintosh on that because there are no drivers written for these hardwares, and it's not practically possible for any enthusiast as well to write a driver from scratch for these hardware. Now, let's talk about why Hackintosh. So, you all know that Mac and Apple, they call it a great ecosystem and it's a whole world in itself, but it's quite expensive to be honest. If you compare a normal laptop for, let's say, about the price of 70,000 rupees, that is the average price of what you would find an Apple MacBook Air for. You would be getting an older generation of an Intel i5 or something, and no dedicated graphics, and only about 128 gigabytes or 256 gigabytes of SSD. And yeah, it has its own perks like great battery and good display, but performance is not specifically great in Apple products. If you would look at a similarly priced Windows machine, you would find dedicated graphics up to say 16 series. You would find the latest generation's i7 processors. You would find great storage options in the same price. But they lack the Apple ecosystem, the Mac OS that we like to call it, the Apple ecosystem, and the iTunes, the iMessages, the FaceTime, and all of that. Right now, a simple statistics would show you that Mac OS only has 17% market share compared to 77% of Windows. But still, macOS is very popular. You would rarely find a person who doesn't know what macOS is or what Apple devices are. And yet it has only 17% market share. And that is because of the reasons I mentioned earlier. It has quite expensive products. It is just not possible to run macOS on any other hardware unless you're attending a workshop on Hackintosh like you are right now. But yeah, but there are a few reasons why you would want to build Hackintosh. That is the Apple ecosystem, the exclusive apps that you have on Mac OS, which are the Final Cut Pro, the Logic Pro X, or even for development, you would want Xcode and the emulation of iOS, which is only possible on Mac OS right now. You obviously have the great interface, which is known to be sleek, smooth, and very futuristic for the macOS, and even more so with the release of macOS Big Sur. And the security, everybody knows that macOS just has great security features as compared to Windows. And the debate whether macOS is good or Windows is better or any other operating system out there is not going to end anytime soon. But if you love macOS and you don't have a Mac, or if you want the best of both worlds, that is, have Mac and Windows, dual boot them, or anything that you want, you are in the right place because we are going to talk about Hackintoshing today. But before we get into how you should do it and whether you should do it, is it legal? Is Hackintoshing legal? Now, according to the end user's license agreement, it says any macOS running on non-Apple hardware is illegal, and to do so would be a breach of the agreement, and that is basically software piracy. But but it is free. It is software piracy, but it is free to acquire. You can download macOS on any app store, on any Mac's app store, and it is free to do so. You can download and install it on any other PC if you would wish so later on, but it is kind of a gray area, and it's completely up to your moral compass to find out if you want to do it or not. But for the sake of this video, we will be teaching you how to build a Hackintosh for educational purposes. Now, you might wonder how you can actually do it because you would not frequently hear anybody run an Apple OS on a non-Apple hardware, and it might be quite challenging in the beginning. Uh, a personal example of mine would be the first time I built a Macintosh about 6 years back on an old Toshiba laptop. It took me about a week to get it even barely running. And after 6 years of practice and experience on Hackintoshing, I can build a Hackintosh right now in this workshop with you guys. So it completely depends on how much time you spend on it. how much experience you have with it, but it's definitely possible. And it's fairly easy with the experience you gain over time. Now, there are two major ways of building Hackintosh, and the first one and the easiest one is to do what is called a virtualization. Now, virtualization is a completely different topic in itself, and it's a fairly big topic, an advanced topic. But if I was to tell you in short what a virtualization is, it is basically emulating another computer inside of your computer. So you can run an entire operating system inside your operating system. And for this workshop, I will be showing you how you can virtualize a Mac OS using VMware. Now there are different virtualization softwares available. You can use VMware, you can use VirtualBox, which are free to acquire. And you might also want to build a KVM, which is a kernel virtual machine, which is quite advanced and a little bit difficult to set up, but you get extra performance in that compared to general virtualization softwares like VirtualBox or VMware. So this is quite easy, I would tell you. And how you should do is a simple Google search. Now, I will just go over that right now. All I would do is open Google Chrome, type in macOS Big Sur VM. As simple as that. What do we want to do? We want to build a Mac, and the latest operating system for that is Big Sur. So I'm going to do that, and VM stands for virtual machine. I just Google that, and I'm just going to open the first link that I get on Google without looking at anything else. And it's a tutorial for you right there. You don't need to do anything. Follow the tutorial, and frankly, it's quite easy to follow these tutorials. All you need to do is download a few stuff, download a few softwares, edit a few lines of codes, and what you would have at the end is a functional macOS. Now I'll be going over this tutorial, and this might seem like a long tutorial, but it frankly won't take time. So what you basically need is to download a copy of macOS for you to install, which is the installer for macOS, and you can download them from these links. And what you also need is a virtualization software, and for this tutorial they're using VMware, which is in my opinion as well a better virtualization software as compared to VirtualBox or any other virtualization software out there. And VMware Workstation Pro is a paid software, but VMware Player 15 is a free software for you to acquire. And for our tutorial it will be fine if you use either of these. So what you should do is go ahead and download VMware Player 15 from the VMware website. You can go ahead and do this right here. Download it for Windows or for Linux. It's up to you to choose your host operating system. You can do that. Install that, go over the setup procedures. It's quite easy to do that. Then you need something called macOS Unlocker. Because macOS cannot be directly virtualized, you need to unlock the VMware to be able to virtualize macOS. You can just download that from the GitHub. It's just a set of scripts that you can just download for any. It would work on Windows and Linux both, or even macOS, but I don't get the point on why you would want to virtualize macOS on macOS. Either way, you can download the installer ISO files from here, and then you would need VMware tools, which is actually optional on the latest version of macOS. It's not even supported yet, so we'll skip that for now. And it has this tutorial is quite good in my opinion, and it has screenshots of how you should actually do everything and go ahead and unlock your uh, VMware, and I will do that right here. So this is the zip that I downloaded. I'm just going to extract that, and this is what you would get as the unlocker tool for VMware. I have VMware already installed on my system. So all you need to do is get over here, when install, right click on this, run it as administrator, and it is a script which would do everything for you right away. You don't need to do anything else. And when this is done, it would be over. It's going to download VMware tools for you, but you would not actually need it. So yeah, just wait for the script to end. and your VMware would be unlocked for you to install macOS on it. Next, what you need to do is to create a virtual machine inside your VMware. So I'm just going to search for VMware. I get my VMware over here. Now, these steps are quite easy for VMware Workstation and your VMware player. So I'm just going to go to File, New Virtual Machine, and frankly, all you need to do here is to just follow this tutorial straight away. You choose typical, I choose typical. Okay, here on the tutorial it says you go over macOS, you will install the operating system later, you select macOS, you select the version, then you go ahead and name your macOS where you want to save it. So let's just go ahead and do that. I will install the operating system later. I will choose macOS, the version 10.16, which is what we expected Big Sur to be, but it turned out to be macOS 11. Either way, you name your macOS whatever you want to name it. You choose a location where you're going to save the macOS files. Then you decide the storage space that you're going to put in Mac. And I suggest you use split virtual disk into multiple files because this will not create a 40 GB file right on your hard disk or SSD. If you choose split virtual disk into multiple files, it is going to only take up space that your virtual machine is actually taking up and not take up the entire space regardless of how much disk space is being used. Let's just keep it at 40 and finish this for now. And here we're going to edit the virtual machine according to your needs. You can give it as much RAM as you want. The greater the better, but obviously if you would have to take into consideration how much RAM your system has. Now my system has 16 gigabytes of RAM, so it's fine even if I give up about 8 gigabytes. I can leave 8 for my Windows and 8 for my macOS. So I'm just, excuse me for that. I'm just going to allocate 8 gigabytes of RAM to this. Then processors, my CPU has 6 cores and 12 threads, so I'm just going to give 2 cores and 2 threads per processor. And next, hard disk you have already set up right there. And for CD DVD, what you need to do is select use ISO image and browse to the location where you have downloaded this particular ISO file, the Mac installer ISO file, these ones. Now I recommend you to get the latest one, which is the public beta one. Now you can just download this ISO file right here. It'll be an zip file in the RAR format. You can extract that. You would get an ISO file. You just need to browse to that ISO file over here and you're good to go. Rest of the configuration is already set up for you. Your network controller, your USB controller, they're already done for you. I'm not going to select an ISO file because I haven't downloaded it yet and it's quite long. But I already have macOS running and I'll switch to that soon. So once you're set up with that, what you need to do is to go over to where you have installed your macOS. So for me, it's in my documents, virtual machines, macOS 6.10.16. So I'll just go over to that, virtual machines, macOS 16, and you find your VMX file right here. So this is basically the file which has the information on how you should run your macOS. Now I'm just going to open that with any text editor. And what you need to do here is also again mentioned in this tutorial. If you just follow this tutorial, there's no way you can go wrong with this. So just go ahead and do this and you would follow this tutorial straight through. We've already done this, customized our settings as well, chosen the ISO file, and after that you get to the point where you edit your VMX file. So you open that in any text editor. I have the VMX file open right here. So all you need to do is get to the end of it. Regardless of what is present in it, this will already be configured with that GUI setup that we have done earlier. What you need to do is copy this set of code, which is basically going to tell VMware about how you want to run your macOS. Copy this code, paste it at the end of this. Now, this contains information on what hardware you are going to mimic, the board ID for that hardware, and so on. You really don't need to understand this for the sake of understanding how virtualization works, but we will be going to go over this in detail when you're going to talk about the next method of Hackintoshing. You do that, you're done with that. All you need to do next is go over to your virtual machine and just power it up. Now I've already done the installation of macOS, and the tutorial also goes over screenshots on how it would go. You select your languages, you go to disk utility, you format the uh, hard disk that you created, your virtual hard disk over here. You would find it listed over here. You just erase that, select it on APFS. That that is the new file system for macOS, which was released about uh, by the launch of 10.14, I believe. And now it's mainstream. APFS is mainstream. You can just choose APFS, give your hard disk any name, make sure you select GUID partition map, and just erase your hard disk, which is going to be only your virtualized hard disk. So this has no effect on your actual operating system whatsoever. And you select install macOS, select continue, go over the instructions, choose your hard disk that you've just recently created. macOS installation would take some time, and you would get up to your installation part, the setup part of it, customization. If you have an Apple ID, you can sign in with your Apple ID and get the features of, say, iMessage or FaceTime, even though you would require extra steps to get all that working, but it would be covered later in this tutorial as well. And VMware tools is optional, and it's not going to work. At least it did not work for me when I was trying to boot up Big Sur on VMware. But VMware tools would give you hardware acceleration, drag and drop support between your host operating system and your virtualized operating system. But yeah, you would get to uh, VMware macOS running inside your operating system. So I'm just going to log in. There you go. You would have a functional Mac running inside macOS, but as you see, this is not quite the best experience. The animations are quite choppy. You have black bars around, but this is what you would require to get a functional macOS running on your hardware. And this is the easiest way to do so, because this can be done on any hardware. You can do it on AMD or Intel or desktop or laptop. Virtualization can be done on anything. You could use Windows host, you can use Linux host, you can use any operating system that supports virtualization, and you would get a macOS running. But this is quite frankly not the best way to do so, because you do not have hardware acceleration. I can just show you the system specifications for this. You would see there is no definition for this Mac. It's just a Mac, and this is 2 into 2.48 gigahertz. There is 8 gigabytes of RAM, as we had mentioned. There is a 3 megabytes of display memory available, which is quite frankly not sufficient for you to be able to do general stuff as well. So this is what you would need to get a general Mac running. Right now, you can do some tweaks over, make it better to work, or you can use a KVM to get hardware acceleration. If you're using a desktop and you have multiple graphics cards installed, you can pass over a graphic card to your macOS. It would give you great performance as well. Even on virtualization, you can, as you can see, I'm running a macOS inside Windows, so this is not going to affect your general workflow in any way. And sometimes it's just better to have a Mac before you can build a Mac. At least that's how it has been for the past few years, but that has quite frankly changed now. And that brings us to the next part of this tutorial, which is, I would call, the real Hackintoshing. And that is your next part, vanilla install. Now, a vanilla install is something which is, I would call, real Hackintoshing, and that is because in a vanilla install, you take your actual hardware and you run macOS on it like you would run a Windows installation on it. Now, this is going over your actual hardware, so there is no virtualization. You would get full acceleration support on your graphics or your processor. You would dedicate all of the resources to only macOS, so it's not being shared or it's not being bottlenecked. Now, this is as good as it sounds on paper in terms of performance. It's quite frankly a bit more difficult to do so as compared to virtualization. As you can see, we've completed virtualization in about 20 minutes or so, but getting over vanilla install is a little more difficult, but once you know how to do it, it's quite easy. And with the release of a few softwares that I'm going to be talking about, it has become even easier. Now, to go over a vanilla install, I would again just tell you a simple Google search is what will help you. All you need is a simple Google search. Now, for our build today, we are going to be looking at the latest version of macOS, which is again Big Sur. Now, there is something called OpenCore bootloader, right? As I had shown you over here in this part, you would need a bootloader, which is the main part of building a Hackintosh, right? So there is something called OpenCore. Now, there have been numerous bootloaders in the past, but let's go over OpenCore for this because it's the latest bootloader in the market. There was starting with Chimera or the Camleon bootloader, then came Clover, which was the best bootloader for a while, and it still is, in my opinion, the best bootloader if you're trying to run something like Catalina or High Sierra, something of the older versions. But for the newest version of macOS, I find OpenCore to be better because macOS, like they are notorious for, they've changed quite a few things from the previous version, which has in fact broken some of the components for Clover. So you would find a really hard time if you're trying to boot the latest version of macOS using Clover. So we're going to be using OpenCore. Now, there is an exception. This time, what you would do is not choose the first link because this is their old website on Gitbook, the Chrono kernel. They have now gotten a new domain, which is Dortania. Even if you were to choose this, they would again tell you to go over to the new website, redirect it over there, which is fine. So we're going to be using this tutorial. Now, this is basically an install guide. This has everything that you need to be running a vanilla macOS install on your hardware, and this has the bootloader. This has all the files you would require. Now you would find me using this same tutorial for the rest of our workshop. Now let's get started. Now I'm going to be going over this prerequisites section once again because this is quite frankly very important. Now, the first part, time and patience. Yes, it requires quite a lot of time and patience if you're doing it for the first time, but you would get used to it if you're used to building Hackintoshing, and if you're a bit of tinkerer, you wouldn't find it difficult. The next and most important part is to know your hardware. You have to be knowing what your current hardware is, and it mentions it very clearly here: CPU name and your generation, your graphic card, your storage devices, whether you have a laptop or a desktop, which you will obviously be knowing, your Ethernet chipset, your wireless LAN Bluetooth chipset, and all of these. Now, these are quite frankly very easy to find out. Let's say I have a i7 in the system that I'm running. This is the CPU that I have, i7-9750H. I just put that up on Google. I would find a site which is the Arc Intel, which would give you all the necessary information for your processor. Now you would find the name. It is 9th generation Intel Core i7 processors. Products formerly Coffee Lake. Now you need this code name. You need to know what your CPU code name is for you to be distinguishing your processors with other processors out there. Now I have a Coffee Lake CPU, right? Now the CPU that I'm going to be building this Hackintosh today for this tutorial is i3 9100. So I'm just going to write i3 9100. Excuse me for that. i3 9100. I do that. I get this. I open this, and this is also Coffee Lake. So I know my CPU is Coffee Lake. It's 9th generation Core i3. And you would also find other information about your graphics here, which is also important if you're not running a dedicated graphics card. So it has an Intel UHD graphics 320, I mean 630. So you need this information if you are not going to be running an external graphics card. But for our tutorial, I will be running an MSI GT 710. Now, I think it's this particular graphics card. Yeah, I'll be running this. Now, this is quite frankly the cheapest NVIDIA graphics card out there that you can buy today to get a functional macOS running. And this is one of the only graphics cards that still have support on the latest macOS. Now, when we will be going over the hardware limitations, you would find out that NVIDIA graphic cards are not easy to run, but the older ones are still okay. Now, you also need to find out what hardware configuration you're running for your storage devices and your Ethernet and chipset. So let's take the example of my laptop. So I have an MSI ZL639 HDK. I open the product page for this. I go into specifications and I would find the exact specifications for this. So I am running this chipset. I'm running this graphic card. I'm running this generation of processor. And I would also find information on my LAN, which is right here. I would also find information on my storage, which is right here. These are in fact all you need to get your basic information about your device ready, because you would need to get specific configuration files to be able to run on your system for different hardware. Now, once you're over with this, just read through all of this prerequisites. I'm sure it's going to help you. And let's get to the more important part of the tutorial, which is your hardware limitations. You're going to be finding out what CPU you have, what GPU you have, what motherboard you have. You find information about all of that over here. So you look at your CPU support. It would tell you what CPUs are supported, what are not supported. As I mentioned, laptop Ryzen CPUs are not supported. The Intel ones are mostly all supported, so you don't really need to worry about if you have a recent Intel processor. For the GPUs, mostly all AMD GPUs are supported. For NVIDIA, as it's mentioned, it's quite complicated because the older ones like the Maxwell and Pascal series, which is the 900 and the 1000 series, are only supported up till High Sierra, and the latest NVIDIA graphics cards are not supported. The Turing architecture, which is the 20 series, the 16 series, those are not supported and will never be supported in Mac OS because you just won't have drivers for them. The NVIDIA Kepler series, however, like I had, NVIDIA GT710, is supported in the latest macOS version, that is Big Sur, and it is uh, quite frankly possible to have it running in the next version of macOS also whenever it comes. The Intel iGPUs are mostly all supported. There are a few exceptions like the Pentium Celeron Atoms, as it's mentioned here. So these iGPUs are very difficult to run. You might not even get them running in most of the cases. For laptops, as it's mentioned, 90% of the chances are that you will not be able to run discrete graphics on laptops. Now, this is because laptops use something called NVIDIA Optimus in most cases, and those use switchable graphics, which are not frankly, they're not just realized in macOS. Those are only Windows technologies. You can go over your motherboard support, your storage support, everything is mentioned here. So you basically just need to check if the hardware that you have, which you've identified in the previous section of the tutorial, is actually compatible or not. Once you're done with that, you can go over the terminology to learn a bit more about the macOS and Hackintoshing paradigm, but I will be explaining these whenever needed. And quite frankly, we are ready to begin the installation of macOS. Now, you would need to create a USB bootable drive for your macOS installation, and you can do this on macOS or you can do this on Windows or Linux. This was not possible before the release of OpenCore, or it was quite difficult. You would need a virtualization machine done over here, like I have, if you wanted to build it over Windows. So you ultimately had to use Mac OS. But for this tutorial, I will be using macOS itself. So if you followed the previous section where you build a virtualized macOS install, you can just go over this and get your VMware macOS running. So you can follow the same tutorial as I do. But I will be showing you my already existing Hackintosh machine, and I'm going to follow the tutorial from there. So let's choose macOS over here. Now, everything that you see here on can be done on Windows the same way you do on Mac OS, can be done on Linux the same way you do in Mac OS. Now you can choose your personalized, your customized hardware as you like. To build the installer, you would need need a USB disk, which is at least 16 gigabytes for Mac OS Big Sur at least. The other operating systems don't require you that much. You can get away with like a 4 gigabyte stick as well, because they don't download the actual Mac OS and put it on your USB disk. They would just get an installer which would then download Mac OS for you and install it on your system right away. But for the latest Mac OS Big Sur beta, you would have to download the entire operating system and put it on your USB disk. Now, let me switch over to my other display right here. So this is my currently running Hackintosh that I have right here. Now, all I need to do is follow the same tutorial over here. So I'm just going to open Google Chrome. I'm going to open the same guide, and I'm going to get to the creating a USB section of it. Now you would see all I need to do is uh, download the script, which is gib Mac OS. Now this script has everything for you. You don't need to do anything. Just click on code, click on download zip. I already have this downloaded, extracted right here. And this is common for all of the operating systems that you're running. So let's say you're running Windows, you would choose make install.bat, or if you're running, let's say Linux, you would choose make install.py. I'm running macOS, so I'll choose give macOS.command, and I open this. This would download the catalog for you. All you need to do is follow along this tutorial, but there's a catch. This tutorial is for the latest publicly released Mac OS, which is Mac OS 10.15, which is Catalina. But for this tutorial, we'll be building Mac OS Big Sur, which is still in beta. But there is a section under the extra tab, which is OpenCore and Mac OS 11 Big Sur. This is what we need to follow for the installation part as well, just the downloading and installation part for Big Sur, which is a little different from what you would generally do. Now, generally, all the downloading and installation part is handled by this script that you downloaded for other macOS versions, but because this is in beta, you have to do it manually. So you get to this script and you need to change your current operating system, which is set to 10.15 by default. You do that by selecting M, then you enter your operating system that you want. So I'm going to enter 10.16, and it's going to download the catalog for that. Just like it is mentioned over here, you do that. When 10.16, it'll update your catalog for you. You select C to change the catalog to developer, which is number 4. I enter that. I get to the catalog for developer options of macOS. Here it is, and you would find macOS Big Sur Beta 11.1 listed over here, which is exactly what we need to download. So I choose number 1 over here and I press enter. Now it says I've already downloaded macOS Beta. Now this wouldn't be there for you. You can just download macOS Beta from here. I'm going to end this script right here because I've already downloaded macOS Beta. What you would get is a folder called macOS Downloads, Developer, and this folder is what you would have downloaded. All you need to do is fire up install assistant dot package. You install it on your system. Now I already have this installed. This is going to take a few seconds, I would say, to get this installed on your uh, hardware, and this would be available in your applications folder. So I have this macOS Big Sur beta as an application installed in my Hackintosh, right? You would have this, and then what you need to do is to format your USB disk. Now I have a USB disk plugged in over here. I'm just using my phone as a USB disk. Now all you need to do is go to erase, select macOS extended. Now this is different from what we have done in the virtualization and what we are going to do next for our in actual installation as well. But for now, you have to choose macOS extended, which is the previous version of file system for macOS. This is just for the installation part of it. You name your disk whatever you want, but I suggest you name it my volume, because I would tell you that when you are going to be using this command, you would require it. It would be easier if you just use my volume, because that's what mentioned in the command. You can actually name it anything that you want, and make sure you select GUID partition map. So Mac OS extended GUID partition map, my volume, and you just go ahead and click on erase. I already have it installed, so I'm not going to click on erase. You do that, and you just take this command, copy it. Now here you would see there is my volume listed. If you have mentioned your name as my volume, you can just copy and paste it right away. But if you have mentioned any other name, you can enter that name right here. Go to your terminal, paste that command right here, and you just click on install. And what you would get is okay, I'll just show it to you. You would get a password prompt. You do that, and it says it's not a volume mount point because I haven't erased that. And what you would get is a prompt to tell it if you want to erase the disk and install macOS. You just click on, just press Y, hit enter. You follow the steps. It would erase your USB disk and install your macOS on it from this macOS Big Sur beta application. This is the part where you download and install macOS on your USB disk. Now you need a few more steps to get it working, as we have gone over your bootloader, your BIOS, and all of that. Now, this is the more important part of the tutorial, which is going to be specific to your own system. All of the steps that I had followed till now were generic and could be done on any system. Now, the next part of the tutorial, we're going to be getting back to this. Now, as you see, we have set up the tutorial, set up the macOS installer from the other tutorial that we had for the latest version of Big Sur. Now, what we need to do is set up an EFI. Now, EFI is what your BIOS looks for when you boot up any operating system. Now, for that, you need to download the macOS bootloader, which is going to be OpenCore for us. You get to the adding the OpenCore base files over here, this part of the section. You download OpenCore's package. You get to their GitHub. You download their latest release. You download it. You extract it, the contents of which you copy into the EFI file. Now to get to the EFI file, all you need to do is download a utility which you can find in this tutorial as well. There is a link to it, I believe, somewhere around. In the creating the installer, you would, well, I guess it's not mentioned right here, but you would need an EFI mounter. So that is basically any tool which can get you to mount EFI if you don't want to do it the command prompt way. You can do that as well from the terminal, but there's an app called EFI Mounter. If you just search on Google for EFI Mounter, you would find it right here from Tony Mac x86. You just download that application, and when you open it, it will ask for a password prompt. I'll just enter that, and then you have the list of devices that are here. Now I open my disk utility and I see my devices disk 4. So I am just going to mount the EFI for disk 4, which is right here. I mount it and it's right here. So I've already pasted the OpenCore boot files, which you would actually get from here. So when you download this release, you copy this EFI folder, which is basically this. You copy this this folder and put it in the root of your USB disk right here. Now the actual part happens inside. And quite frankly, you can just follow this tutorial along. This would help you get through all of this. And you basically need to delete some of the unused files from here, the unused drivers for EFI. But if you're using, let's say, a PS2 keyboard or PS2 mouse, you have to keep it. You can just read through the descriptions if you are skeptical of what you're doing, and if you want to understand why these drivers are present and why you want to delete them and all of that, you can read up all of this. But you basically need to clean up your EFI because this bootloader is quite generic and you might not need most of these. You get over here and this is your cleaned EFI folder. Now we are going to be starting to customize this folder for our installation. Now you gather the files that you need to download. First is the firmware drivers. Now any system to be able to run macOS, which is not Apple, you would require hfsplus.efi. This driver is needed for us to be able to boot our USB installer. You need openruntime.efi, which is going to help you get over your T2 chip encryption system that has been put by macOS to bypass all of that. You need this, and if you're using not a UEFI BIOS or a legacy BIOS, you can download these versions of that drivers. Then you need something called KEXT. Now KEXT stands for kernel extensions. This is the equivalent of drivers that you have in Windows. Now these two are the must-have KEXT that you need. You need virtual SMC. You need this if you are going to run macOS on anything but Apple hardware. Or alternatively, you can choose fake SMC, but you would generally just use virtual SMC. And then you have Lilu. This is a Kext, which is more or less like a parent Kext to a lot more Kex. And you require this because, as it's mentioned here, if you need for audio or video or virtual SMC, you need Lilu to be present in your Kext extensions. Then you can go over the SMC plugins that you have. Let's say if you have a Dell sensor, if you want to find out the thermals of your CPU, you need these kegs. You just go over the descriptions. If you're going to be using graphics, which you obviously need, you have to have whatever green, which is another kegs. And if you're using laptops, you will also need PNLF files, which is going to control your brightness and stuff. You need Apple ALC for your audio. You can just click on these links. It would direct you to the GitHub page. You can download these specs from their releases. For your Ethernet, as you had seen there, you're going to be downloading the Ethernet. I have Realtek RTL 8111, which is what most people would have. You can just download that kex from here. For your USB, you can download that. You can find out your chipset as you had seen on your product description, which was H370 for my laptop and it is HT10 for my PC that I'm going to be building for on. You get your Wi-Fi and Bluetooth drivers. Mostly your Wi-Fi and Bluetooth will not work on macOS because Broadcom. Uh, Apple does not use Qualcomm or uh, Broadcom drivers. They don't use Atheros, so you would not be able to run Wi-Fi or Bluetooth in most cases, but you can actually buy quite inexpensive uh, hardware for Wi-Fi and Bluetooth separately, which would be available on, let's say, Amazon as well. And you can install that hardware if you want to run. There is descriptive guides for all of that down here. If you want to run Wi-Fi or Bluetooth, all of that, you can read through this guide. You would find out. And for extras, you can have your NVMe drivers if your hard disk or SSD is not supported. If you are using PS2 drivers or if you're using I2C touchpads on laptops, let's say, you can go over all of that. But let's get to the most important part, which is the SSDT. Now, this is the part where I mentioned, remember, about if your BIOS does not have specific options, you would need to edit settings which cannot be edited in your BIOS directly. So you need something called SSDTs. Now this guide is amazing. You would find all of the required SSDTs right here. You don't need to write a single line of code for you to be running your macOS. You can just download the pre-built SSDTs from here. So you have the platform names that you had find out from the arc.intel site. So I have Coffee Lake. I need this, and this. I need these for SSDTs to run my macOS, and this is for the desktop platform. If you are using laptop platform, you can get here. You can find what SSDTs you need and download all of that. Let's take this as an example. So I choose this. The method to make this is DT. If you have the knowledge, skill and the time to write codes for SSDTs, you can go ahead and manually do so. But if not, you can just click on pre-built. You can download this SSDT and keep it. I would tell you where to put this SSDT very shortly. So you basically gather all the files that you need from it. You download all of these. You download all the kexts from before, whichever kext you need according to your hardware. You have your kext, you have your SSDTs. The next most important part is the config file. Now you can choose your platform from here, if it's desktop or if it's laptop or if it's HEDT or AMD, whatever it is. So I'm using desktop Coffee Lake. I just click on that. You would require these three components which are must. Property tree is a software which is available for Windows, Mac and Linux. You can just download it from here, and it would be great to mention that all of the softwares that I'm using here, all of the scripts, everything is open source, is available on GitHub for you, and it's quite easy to get the releases. You download this right here, you run the property command. Now obviously macOS has its security features which would want me to take an extra step to open an unauthorized application, but you get here. What you need to do is there is a sample.p list given to you in your OpenCore release download, which is right here. You load this sample.p list into this proper tree. You can just go to file, open, and open this sample.p list, and you would get your plist here. I'm going to load the plist that I've made for my system, provided I find it. I have a copy on desktop either way. Yeah, so you would find something like this. Then what you do is you go to the EFI file, EFI folder that you have on your USB disk. You go to OpenCore, you get to this part, and all the SSDTs that you downloaded will go into ACPI. So right here, I have these four SSDTs pasted right here. All the kex that you downloaded go into the kex file, right? This is all you need to do. All you need to be doing. That's it. You copy your kex in kex folder. You copy your SSDTs in ACPI folder. You're done. You come to proper tree. You go to file. You select OC clean snapshot, and you move your way through your EFI folder to your EFI and OpenCore. So you basically need to get to this folder right here. You link to this folder, select it, and it would load all of this information for you on your own. You don't need to write code for it. It would do that for you, as it is mentioned in this tutorial as well. You need to just follow all of this tutorial. Now it tells you if you how to you can actually write code for it, but if not, you can just follow the proper tree application for it. And this config.plist file has a lot of sections, the ACPI section, the booter section. This tutorial config file section would tell you exactly what you need to do. So for the desktop Coffee Lake, I need to follow these tutorials. I need to set these settings, and to change these, it would tell you exactly what you need to do. Just follow this along. There's nothing more that you need to do. There's nothing less that you need to do. Go over this, come to here. When you're done, comes the bigger part, the BIOS settings. Now, if your BIOS has all of these settings, you can enable them or disable them as mentioned. But if your BIOS does not have these settings, what you need to be doing is to find ways to get your SSDTs. Now, obviously, you would have these settings because you have chosen desktop BIOS, but if you don't have, the SSDTs would take care of that. If you encounter any error, you can just go over to Google, type in your error. You would find support on any of the forums or the general Google searches as well. You would find somebody has already gotten that issue before. You can just go over that. This is what you need for getting a config file running. Now at the end, you just rename your config, your this sample.plist that you have right here to config.plist and put it in the EFI OC folder right here. You're done. You're ready to boot up macOS. You plug in your USB. You set these settings in your BIOS, and you will be greeted with your macOS installation right away. You don't need to do anything else. Follow the same steps that we did over for the virtualization part for setting up your macOS, get over the installation, you do all of that and you're done. Next comes making your macOS properly functionally running with all acceleration and all that stuff. Now, this is not an easy part and it's going to take time for you to do because it's specific to hardware, but there are specific guides for you to follow over here. So if you are facing any troubleshooting problems, you can go over here. If you need help in installation, you have installation process over here. It'll tell you to double check what you have done, get to the macOS installer, booting OpenCore, installing macOS. You do all of that. If you have issues, you can go to troubleshooting section. You can find out if somebody has already encountered that error. Now this guide is quite great because it has everything for you available. So it has mentioned the errors that you might find. You can just click on that. It would provide you with the solution on how to solve that. It has quite a lot of errors, so there is a very rare chance that you might stumble on something which nobody else has encountered before. Now you come to post install. Post install is where you would be refining your Hackintosh. Now, there are guides specifically for this. If you want to multi-boot, let's say you want Windows and macOS running together, you can do this. You have problems with USB drivers, you can do that. If you are using laptops, let's say for your touchpad or for your display brightness and all that control, you can choose all of that. Everything is mentioned right here. You can just follow these guides. Fixing your sleep, your USB, your DRM protection. Say you want to run Netflix or Apple TV on your Mac, you can go over that. You have your USB fixes, laptop specifics, you can go over all of this. And if you encounter any specific errors, everything is mentioned right here. You don't need to look at anything else if you are using OpenCore, which was not so great for other bootloaders, but for this, it's quite easy using OpenCore because you can just follow this same guide, and you have other options as well, security, booting without the USB which you would need after you've installed macOS. So you can just follow this guide. You're going to mount your EFI for your hard disk. You can follow this along, and it would basically be copying your EFI file from your USB to your SSD or your hard disk. So you can just boot up straight away without using that USB every single time. You can fix up DRM, your iMessages, your FaceTime, everything can be fixed here if it's not working. And as you see, everything is mentioned right here. You can go over the post install section here. This is another guide in itself. And you would at the end get a functional macOS running just like I have over here. So I would show you what I'm actually running over here. So it recognizes this as an iMac 2019. So this is my iMac 19,1, which I'm using over here. This is the processor I'm using. So it says 3.5 gigahertz quad core Intel Core i3. I have 8 gigabytes of 2400 megahertz RAM, and I have the NVIDIA GT710. And as you see, I have 2 gigabytes of memory in here as compared to the 4 MB that I was getting on the virtualization process that we went through. And this is a fully functional Mac OS. As you see right here, it can run anything and everything like normal. I can run Apple TV, I can run iTunes, it would run just fine. There is no issues with that. I can go over and use iMessages or iTunes or FaceTime, even though I don't use that. You can do that if you want. You can install, let's say, like Final Cut Pro. You can uh, basically run it like any other macOS, and you can tweak it up with your personal preferences using the post install guide. All right, this is what you need to be running a Hackintosh. And this is the end of the tutorial. And if we had more time, I could have shown you the BIOS settings in more detail, but trust me, you don't really need anything else. If you just follow the guide that I have shown you right here. So this guide would cover everything for you. It has everything from the beginning till the end. And over the course of 6 years of me trying to run Hackintoshing on different machines, I have never found a guide better written than this. And it's very easy to follow along. It's very comprehensive. There is no chance that you might end up going wrong. And even if you do, you can just follow the troubleshooting section, or you can look up any forum online. I would suggest use Insanely Mac or Tony Mac X86. There are so many forums online. You can go over any of those. A simple Google search would help. And if you really want a Mac OS running, and if you don't have the hardware for it, this is how you do it, and this is the best way to do it. Vanilla install, no crappy stuff along as you might find on some of the pre-built Macs that you can get from, say, Niresh OS X, which was there quite some time ago. Hackintosh Zone, as they called it. That was quite easy to install. You can just download an ISO file, put it on your pen drive, boot it with it, install it. It was quite easy to do, but then it had a lot of bootloader, and there were concerns about privacy and installation. Anyway, all of that is scrapped. Naresh OS X doesn't exist anymore, and vanilla installation reigns supreme as it always has. Now, moving on to the future of Hackintoshing. Now, Apple is about to release the ARM processors with the name of Apple Silicon. Now, that might lead to the phasing out of Intel Macs, and you do not know if for how long will macOS be supported on Intel platforms. And the good news is that they just released an iMac with the latest 10th generation i9 processor. So Apple is known for supporting their hardware for at least about 5 years or so. So you know that for the upcoming 5 years, there is a chance that you can easily build a Hackintosh. Even otherwise, as you have seen that macOS is kind of broken with every single update to major update to the macOS. You have seen how it has broken stuff from Catalina to Big Sur, but you know, invention is uh, not going to be stopped by just updation of macOS. So here comes OpenCore to help us install latest version of macOS, and we have done so. So similarly, there might be something which might allow us to run future versions of Hackintosh on our systems, or you might never know. We might come up with ARM processors, Hackintoshes, anything might happen. So yeah, this is the end of the tutorial. Thank you for joining us, and don't forget to follow us on our social media, Tag Club. We're up there on Instagram, on Facebook, on LinkedIn. You can find us anywhere. Do follow us. Uh, and thank you for joining this workshop. This is Vinayak Sharma signing off. Thank you.